Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today, I have for you a deck tech video on Thrawn Red. Now, this is a deck that I actually took to the Battlegrounds PQ in Virginia a couple weeks ago. I'm going to put video chapters in the description below, so feel free to jump to any part of the video that interests you. This is also slightly a different style of deck tech video than I've done in the past, so please let me know if you enjoy it. With that, let's get right into the video. And a big shout out to the YouTube members. That's Ganix, Reviki, Drew Kirkpatrick, and the true Thrawn Red Cabal leader, Rabbit13. Thank you all so much for your continued support for the channel. So what about Thrawn has me interested? Why should you run him? Well, let's take a look at what he does. Thrawn is a Vigilance Villainy leader with the ability, when you use a when defeated ability, you may exhaust Thrawn. If you do, use the ability again. He flips on 6 as a 4/7 with the ability, when you use a when defeated ability, you may use that ability again. Use this once each round. So just to clear things up, I may refer to when defeated abilities as death rattles. That's just the byproduct of my Hearthstone days, so I apologize if that's a little confusing and I hope this clears it up. Thrawn wants cards with when defeated abilities, or that work well with when defeated abilities. In Thrawn's native colors, there are a couple of cards that are obviously meant to be used with him. Director Krennic, who's a 2/2 shielded unit with the ability the first unit with a when defeated ability you play each phase costs 1 less. Desperate Commando, who's a 2/2 with the when defeated ability give a unit -1/-1 for this phase, which when doubled could either give 2 units -1/-1 or the same unit -2/-2, which often trades into a lot of the new 2/4 turn 1 plays that we saw with Legends of the Force. Or cards like the Chimera, which has the when played ability that lets you trigger friendly when defeated abilities of other friendly cards, and it also has its own when defeated ability. However, you can use Chimera's when played ability to trigger the death rattles of other cards, then double those death rattles with Thrawn. These are just some of the great when defeated cards in Thrawn's natural colors. But the other question is, what color should we be running with Thrawn? Thrawn is one of the unique leaders where he actually has an argument to be in any color. Yellow. He gets access to Legacy Run, which can be a board wipe since we can double the when defeated ability, dealing 6 damage twice for a total of 12. Or Lothcat, which can exhaust 2 units when it's defeated. Green, you get Cobb Vanth, which can be doubled to play 2 2-drops on his when defeated. You also can do things like Confederate Carrier to make 2 battle droids, which isn't that impactful, but it's still something. And note that Super Laser Technician actually doesn't really work with Thrawn's ability. Still a good card, but you can't double ramp him and split the card in half and put him in your resource row twice. That just doesn't work. And lastly, the color that we're actually going to talk about today is red. In red, you get access to a bunch of really interesting cards, and a lot of them deal direct damage to base, making your opponent have an impossible choice. Do I defeat the unit in front of me and let it deal 4 damage to my base, or do I let it just swing for 2 every turn? Cards like Series Officer, Droid Missile Platform, and Ruthless Raider to name a few. With 3 and 3 Ruthless Raiders, technically that threatens 30 damage without ever attacking. And that thought was not only very interesting to me, but also the growing contingent of the cult of Thrawn Red growing in my Discord, led by the mysterious leader Rabbit13. So now we know that we are in red, but what base do we want to use? You have Tarkin Town, Shadow Collective Company, Thermal Oscillator, Force Base, Temple of Destruction, or 30 HP. Well, let's explain a little bit about our strategy first. If the game lasts long enough, eventually I will deal enough burn damage to you and defeat you. Doesn't matter the base. So usually crippling ourselves with HP penalties isn't great and not what we want to do. Most of the losses that I've actually had with this deck have come down to a single action away. So for me, this is going to eliminate Thermal Oscillator, Tarkin Town, and Shadow Collective Company. We just don't need the penalty for HP, and really none of them benefit our game plan that well. The next question we have to ask, is the Force better for us? And the answer is likely no. You do get some stronger units, but there are downsides. Let's look at Jedi in Hiding as a perfect example of this. Jedi in Hiding is a 3-cost 3/3 hidden with the when defeated ability you may use the Force. If you do, each opponent discards a card. At surface level, it may seem great because we get to discard 2 cards, except the problem here is that the when defeated ability requires a Force usage to activate. So you could double trigger the when defeated ability, but for each time you trigger that when defeated ability, you have to use a separate Force token. So it would require a total of 2 force tokens at the same time to actually trigger, which can't actually happen. It doesn't actually synergize that well with our strategy. This is the reason I tend to go with a 30 HP base. So, like I always say, let's talk about the packages that go into this deck, because this is how I build decks, is by packages. As the title suggests, I actually ran this exact list at the PQ. I did okay, I went 3 and 4 with it, and probably could have gone 5 and 2 if I had more reps on the deck. I didn't have nearly enough reps as you should going into a PQ. Running into 2 red-green hero ECL decks is really hard for this deck in particular to overcome, at least the way that it's built right now. Basically, I was 1 action away in 2 out of the 4 games against these decks, and we'll get to see the changes I would make later on. However, this is the original version of the deck. Let's talk about the turn 1 plays of this deck. First up is Desperate Commando. This card is actually really great in Thrawn right now. Desperate Commando is a 2-cost 2/2. With the when defeated ability, you may give a unit -1/-1 for this phase. So Commando can either give 2 units -1/-1, or it could give the same unit -2/-2 when you double it with Thrawn. You may already see why this in particular is pretty powerful for this meta. If your opponent plays something like a Yaddle, a Karis, a Secretive Sage, you can swing into it with the Commando. When she's defeated, you double trigger the Death Rattle with Thrawn, and then you can defeat that same unit. So if it's a 2/4, you do the extra -2/-2, and now it's dead. Or if it's a shielded unit, you pop the shield, which kind of sucks, but then you still get the -2/-2, which would go through the shield. She's also really good into Mig's Mayfield right now, since Mig's deals 2 damage to her with the discard in like the Kylo decks, because their original turn is play Mig's, discard a card, hit whatever your turn 1 play is, and possibly Tarkin Town it if it needs to be Tarkin Towned. So with Desperate Commando, if she takes the 2 damage from Mig's and she dies, well, you can -2/-2 Mig's and take him out in return, which is kind of actually a really good play against those Kylo decks, because their goal is, I'm going to play my turn 1 play and deny you your turn 1 play. So moving on, we've got Night Sister Warrior. This is an obvious really good card in this deck, because Night Sister Warrior is just a 2-cost 2/2, when defeated, draw a card. And in Thrawn, she's a draw 2, which is amazing. People are playing Ki-Adi-Mundi for 4, using a force token, and paying 2 extra resources for the draw 2. Now, Ki-Adi is a when played draw 2, we're a when defeated draw 2, so we're a little bit slower. However, we come out 2 turns earlier, so we kind of draw the 2 cards around the same time in the game, which is kind of important. Now, she does have less stats than Ki-Adi-Mundi, but that's just okay. We run 3 Night Sister Warriors, and I don't think I said this, but we run 3 Desperate Commandos as well. We also run 2 Inferno 4s, which is a 2-cost 2/3 space unit. When played, when defeated, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put any number of them on the bottom of your deck, and the rest on the top in any order. So why Inferno 4 is good is because we're already scrying, which is what this term is called, for cards. We're trying to find the best cards in our deck. We do have a lot of card draw with things like Night Sister Warrior, so also making the cards that we draw even better is really good in this deck. It's also when played scry 2, so if you put both on the bottom and then Inferno 4 ends up getting defeated that same turn, you can look at another 2 cards. If you don't like them, put them at the bottom, double trigger the effect, look at another 2 cards, and you can either put them on the bottom or the top. Sometimes the double trigger doesn't matter. In the case of, like, you like both cards, so you put both on top, so there's no point in looking at them again. So if for some reason Inferno 4 and another when defeated card get defeated at the same time, always trigger Inferno 4 first to see if you want to double trigger the when defeated. If you do, then just double trigger it. If not, you can double trigger the other one. Next, and this is where we're finally getting into the support cards that supports our strategy. This is Series Officer. He's a 2-cost 2/1, when defeated, deal 2 damage to a base. And you can see why this guy is really powerful in this deck. Your opponent's best option the majority of the time is actually to defeat Series Officer as soon as he's played. Because for 2 resources, at minimum, most of the time we can guarantee 4 damage to base. If he's not defeated, think about this. You get a swing in for 2 with Series Officer, and then they go, okay, well, I'm still not going to defeat him. So you swing in for 2 again. At that point, they should have already defeated because he was already guaranteed to do 4 damage anyway. So now, on the next turn, we could sacrifice double trigger, deal 4 damage to base, so our 2 resource card has just dealt 8 damage to an opponent. And this is the type of card that is absolutely insane in this deck. Also, 2 resources means he curves out really, really well. So we run 3 of them, no questions asked. And think about this. If you play 3 which isn't like that crazy, it is a 2 resource card, so if you see them, most likely you're going to play them. That is a guaranteed almost 12 damage to your opponent's base. 12 damage out of 6 resources to the opponent. And that's without any swingings, without anything like that. Like, you can easily go turn 3, Series Officer, Inferno 4, and you get a swing with something and then deal the damage with So is one of the rock stars of this deck. And of course, we run 3. Next is First Order Stormtrooper. A 1-cost 2/1 on attack when defeated, deal 1 indirect damage to a player. Indirect damage isn't that crazy in this deck because a lot of times we don't output enough of it like Boba Fett so that the indirect damage like overwhelms people with cards like First Order Stormtrooper. The reason why First Order Stormtrooper is in here is because he kind of fills out a nice curve. A lot of times you go 2-drop into like wasted resource. So First Order Stormtrooper is just a 1-cost card that can easily fit that role. And obviously, it's no question that we're going to play 3 Director Krennics here. 2/2, shielded. The first unit you play each round that has the when defeated ability costs 1 less. With Krennic, he's kind of our best turn 1 play into a lot of matchups if they don't have like a Sabine or something like that. Because Krennic, a lot of times, you can go turn 1 Krennic into a free First Order Stormtrooper. That shuts off Power of the Dark Side. If you go Krennic, next turn, you can go double 2-drop. You could go like Night Sister Warrior, Series Officer, which is also really powerful. Director Krennic also lets us play a 3-drop for 2 and then follow up with a First Order Stormtrooper. So Director Krennic is also not really good for trying to cheat out larger when defeated cards, but Director Krennic's also really good at allowing us to effectively flood the board with pretty decent when defeated units. And once you have like 3 2/2s on the board with the burn damage that this deck can already put out, that little bit of chip damage is all we need. And a lot of times you can really, really chip away at your opponent kind of quicker than you'd expect. So Krennic is probably our best turn 1 play going forward. Next up, let's talk about the when defeated package, because that's the most important package of this entire deck, right? We're already trying to play as many when defeated cards as we can. So we're going to start off and let's look at the first card, which is Droid Missile Platform. 3 cost, 4/2, when defeated, deal 3 indirect damage to a player. And like I said, indirect damage isn't that crazy a lot of times because we don't have mass amounts of indirect damage to put out. However, with a single card, we can deal 6 indirect damage, and as early as this puppy comes out, that's actually really good in a lot of indirect damage that we can play. He's also strong because he's a 4/2. So 4 damage is threatening enough that your opponent doesn't really want to let this run into base once or even twice. Like sometimes we're like, all right, I have to take the 4 damage here. They're not going to want to take 8 from your 3 resource card. The other thing about this, and why Droid Missile Platform is better in this deck than most other decks, is a 3-cost 4/2 is actually kind of really bad stats, even with a good when defeated, like 3 indirect damage. Think about it like this. If your opponent starts out with a Kylo's TIE Silencer on turn 1, like, that's not an insane card to play on turn 1. I mean, you could even run, Inferno 4 on turn 1. Then, if you were to play Droid Missile Platform that same turn, it's not that great because your opponent can go 3-drop, which can be like a 3/5 unit. Those are really common. I think every color pie has access to one of those now. And then they trade Kylo's TIE Silencer into Droid Missile Platform, and then they would just take 3 indirect damage onto their turn 1 play. So effectively, you would have your turn 1 play, they would have traded their turn 1 play, and their turn 2 play would have soaked the 3 indirect damage from this. Why this is better in Thrawn is obviously we deal 6 indirect damage. In that same situation where they're playing their 3/5, now we deal 6 indirect damage. So at least if they want to keep that 3/5 alive, they have to take at least 2 indirect damage to base. So it can be like deal 2 damage to base early on and trade with a unit. So that's pretty good. And if that happens, right, now they have like a 3/1 on the board, you cleared their turn 1 play, you probably still have your turn 1 play. So your turn 1 play can either swing into base, or if it's like Krennic, you could probably take out their turn 2 play, leaving him behind since he had like a shield or something like that. So Droid Missile Platform is actually a really solid turn 2 play and really, really threatening. We run 3 of them because they are so strong and threaten a ton of damage at any point for cheap. The next card, and I'm going to be honest with you here, it's probably just a worse Night Sister Warrior because it has too much health to be a good when defeated card. It's Landing Shuttle. It's a 2/4. When defeated, you may draw a card. We already have a lot of card draw in the deck. A 2/4 isn't that threatening for your opponent because they're going to look at it. They're like, okay, well, I'm on a 15-turn clock now, so I don't really care. The when defeated, draw a card is nice if you can get it, but a lot of times, I don't actually get the when defeated to trigger. And at the PQ, every time I played this card, I don't think it ever got defeated. Not a single time. So I'm going to be honest with you. This is probably the card that I'm going to take out first when I change things around in the deck. So I do run only 2 of them, but still, I don't think that these make the cut. Next, a card that does make the cut that kind of fits the same role is Starwing Scout. Now, this is just Landing Shuttle's bigger brother. He's a 3 cost, so same cost, 4/1. When defeated, if you have the initiative, draw 2 cards. So if we double it with Thrawn, you freaking draw 4 cards off your 3 resource card. That's insane. Now, yes, it only works if you have initiative, which you can't guarantee, but it is a high risk, high reward card. If you have initiative and you trade this into their like turn 2 4 HP spaceship, then you draw 4, which is good. If you swing 4 into base, they're taking 4 damage, and then if you had initiative, and a lot of times you can like maintain the initiative throughout the game, eventually they're going to have to defeat Starwing Scout, and you're going to draw 4 cards. If Starwing Scout swings into base, deals 4 damage, and eventually draws you 4 cards, that is almost a game-winning play on itself. Yes, highly risky, but I think it warrants enough in the deck to be played. And I only run 2. I might actually bump this up to 3 in future iterations because it is so powerful. Now, I'm sure everybody kind of was aware of this next card. We run 3 Ruthless Raiders. For those who don't know, who weren't playing during Django, 6 cost, 4/6, when played, when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. Ruthless is almost a guaranteed 6 damage in this deck. You either play it, you get the 2 damage from the when played, and then either you get a swing with Ruthless on the next turn, or if it gets defeated, you get a double trigger him with Thrawn and deal 4 damage by getting the 2 damage twice with Thrawn. It's one of the cards that your opponent must deal with no matter what, but they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, unless they have something like No Glory Only Results or Force Lightning. Otherwise, Ruthless Raider is just a menace. And it also has fast damage with the when played effect, because when played, deal 2 damage is really good if your opponent like is right about to die. You've really put them on the back foot. You send all your damage into base, and you're like, okay, I know I have a Ruthless Raider in my hand. On my next action, I'm just going to play Ruthless Raider, deal 2 damage to base, and win the game. That happens a lot in this deck, so Ruthless Raiders, obvious 3 of, really, really great card. So that's our when defeated package. Now, the next question you might ask, and one of the biggest downsides of this deck, is the fact that sometimes your opponent just doesn't play ball, right? The problem with when defeated cards, and why typically they're so like kind of middling to okay, is if you don't have a way to defeat your own units, and if your opponent lane dodges you or says, you know what, I'm going to make you defeat your own units by trading into my units, you kind of fall out of favor and you don't get that much value out of your cards. So we need some way to enable that ourselves. And we have a couple cards. So first up, I actually have these in the wrong order here, but first up we have the Chimera. And we run 3 of them in this version of the deck. I do think eventually I would cut this down to 2 because it's kind of a little too combo-y. So Chimera, when played, you may use a when defeated ability on another friendly unit. When defeated, create 2 TIE Fighter tokens. The TIE Fighter tokens aren't necessarily game-changing. They actually did matter in one game at the PQ. Being able to drop 2 TIE Fighters does do things like completely shut off Merciless Contest and Power of the Dark Side, which is nice. But, you know, they could also trade into like smaller units, but they're not like that impactful. One time I did actually double trigger the 2 TIE Fighters with Thrawn because I didn't have anything else to do that turn. And I was like, yeah, you know what? 4 TIE Fighters, eventually that's threatening 4 damage. It also lets me like waste actions by chump attacking their base. But the real key with Chimera here is that you can play him and trigger when defeateds of like Ruthless Raider. Let's say you have Krennic out, because one of the powers of Krennic is you get to play when defeated cards 1 turn earlier. So you have Krennic, on turn 4, you play Ruthless Raider. Then, on turn 5, you play the Chimera down, targeting the Ruthless Raider. Ruthless Raider then triggers its when defeated effect, dealing 2 damage to base, 2 damage to a unit, you double trigger it with your Thrawn leader, dealing another 2 damage to base, another 2 damage to a unit. Then if you were to flip Thrawn and they somehow defeat your Chimera, or they defeat the Ruthless Raider that's already out there, well, now that Thrawn has flipped, this is another activation of the when defeated, so you can double trigger it again. And things like that are why Chimera is really powerful, and why you do kind of want to see Chimeras quite often, but having 3 of them sometimes just isn't it. And if you only have like no good when defeated cards, or your when defeated card is like Night Sister Warrior, where you're only drawing 2 cards, sometimes it just doesn't feel that great. But a 5/6 for 5 or 6 is really good, and it does enable us to get off our when defeated cards. Just having the threat of a Chimera in the deck actually makes it so that people second guess leaving when defeated cards alive. So if you have like an series officer, sometimes people are like, listen, man, I'm just going to let you deal 2 damage to base every time, and I'm going to lane dodge you in space. You're like, okay, cool. Lane dodge me in space. I'm just going to throw down Chimera. I'm going to deal 4 damage to base and have a 5/6 in space. Now I'm threatening 7 damage on my next turn. And if you play something to the ground, well, then that's 4 damage. If I play like another Chimera, I could deal another 4 damage, right? So there are ways that Chimera is really, really, really strong. And it does give that threat of like, I can't leave when defeated units alive because Chimera can still get value. Next up is Count Dooku, who is an 8-cost, 6/6, exploit 2, overwhelm. When played, for each unit you exploited while playing this card, you may deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the power of the exploited unit. So, why is this card good? Well, Count Dooku is often our best turn 3 play. Yes, our turn 3 play. Because sometimes what you can do, and it's really, really impactful, is if you have something like your droid missile platform, apologies here. So if you have something like your droid missile platform, and let's even say Krennic, just because I have them both right in front of me. So you have droid missile platform and you have Krennic, and then you have Count Dooku. What you can do is you can swing with both, deal 6 damage to base, and then let your opponent play out their turn 3 turn. Even if it's like Sabine, right? If you're playing against a Sabine, this is the best way to defeat them. They flip Sabine. You go, okay, flip Sabine. I'm going to exploit both Krennic and droid missile platform. Now, you get to deal 4 damage and 2 damage. Like, you get to deal them separately. So, 1 damage is dealt in a batch of 4, 1 is dealt in a batch of 2. You can send all 6 damage to Sabine, defeat a Sabine. And then, you have a 6/6 overwhelm on the board, which can then start running over all of their other cards. If they try to ECL a Poe at you, just to defeat him, well, then you're good that you wasted their ECL with one of your cards. But Count Dooku, a lot of times, is a 4-cost board wipe, also like dealing extra damage. If you have Night Sister Warrior out, Dooku can like draw 2, deal 3 indirect damage. If he hits an series officer, he can, deal 4 damage to base, draw 1 card. So Count Dooku's really good in the deck because you are sacrificing some power, but a lot of times you are clearing the board, then dealing indirect damage, and then leaving a 6/6 behind. Like, think about it this way. I know in that same scenario with Droid Missile Platform, if you exploit Droid Missile Platform, play Count Dooku. Let's say you cleared the board because you did 4 damage and 2 damage. You defeated a Ki-Adi-Mundi and like a 2 health itinerant warrior that didn't have a shield anymore, or something like that, right? Now you have your when defeated trigger of 6 indirect damage, or 3 indirect damage that you can double to 6, and deal 6 damage to base if their board's clear. Like, that's insane. Clear the board, 6 damage to base, drop a 6/6 overwhelm. That just doesn't exist in this game outside of this deck. So, Count Dooku, really, really, really powerful card. Oftentimes, a 4-cost board wipe with playing a 6/6 behind it. Closers. So, I am kind of, again, backwards here. But closers. A lot of times, this deck does revolve around pushing tons of early damage and burn damage, but we will still need some kind of closer in the decks in case, we get the corner turned on us. They do something like Super Laser Blast us. They start healing a little bit. Just having some big threats that might not necessarily help our when defeateds out are good and something that we should include. Let's start off with Planetary Bombardment. I do run 3 currently in the main deck. The reason why, for those who don't know, Planetary Bombardment is a 6 cost, deal 8 indirect damage to a player. If you control a capital ship, deal 12 indirect damage instead. So you already saw that we are going to talk about Devastator from Jump to Lightspeed here soon. But we run 3 Ruthless Raider and 1 Devastator. So it isn't uncommon that you get the 12 indirect damage proc. Where this comes in handy is, let's say your opponent Super Laser Blasts you. And you're like, okay, I've been Super Laser Blast. I'm going to deal 4 damage with Series Officer and 3 indirect damage with Droid Missile Platform. Or, the other way around would be the better way to do it. So you end up dealing 8 face damage once you get Super Laser Blasted. Then you just go, okay, I'm just going to play Planetary Bombardment here then. So that's a total of 16 damage to base. If you double trigger 3 indirect damage from Droid Missile Platform, that's 6. And like an Series Officer is 2. 16 damage for 6. And after they board wiped you. It makes something like Super Laser Blast actually awful to play into you. Because they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to clear your board. You're like, okay, cool. 16 damage. Half your health. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that for me. The other thing that's kind of sneaky with Planetary Bombardments is, look at it again, deal 8 indirect damage to a player. So one thing that is kind of like a high-level play with this deck is if you have something like Droid Missile Platform, Droid Missile Platform's obviously not the card here. Let's say that you have a Ruthless Raider and an Series Officer out. So I'm going to rearrange my cards real quick. So you have Planetary Bombardment, Series Officer, Ruthless Raider. And you really, really need to deal 6 damage to the opponent's base. You can Planetary Bombardment yourself. So you choose yourself, you get to assign the indirect damage, you assign 6 to Ruthless Raider, 1 to Series Officer, you double trigger one of them, that's 6 damage to base. Don't get tunnel vision to always lock Planetary Bombardment into your opponent. It actually can be a I'm going to target myself type effect. It's not obvious a lot of times, but think about it like that sometimes, and you'll actually unlock a lot of plays in this deck. So Planetary Bombardment might be the best card against control, just because they don't play that many units, so they can't soak a lot of the indirect damage. And then our last closer, we run a single copy of Devastator, which is an 8 cost, 9/6. You get to assign all indirect damage you deal. When played, deal 4 indirect damage to each opponent. We run 1 copy, a single copy, just to, again, have that threat in the deck of a Devastator. And this actually, which is kind of funny, you might not believe me, won me 2 games in my PQ, just this single copy. Because you get to 8, you've burned them out significantly, and then you go, all right, you've been burned out, 4 damage to base. Really powerful. The 9/6 really never mattered for me. It's like the 4 face damage and 1 action that mattered. I actually think Devastator is one of the most impactful cards in the deck, just as 1 copy. I don't think you ever need 2 copies of it. You could run Devastator and then Planetary Bombardment follow-up. That is, I will talk about that, but I did lose a game to a Boba Data Vault that did exactly that. They went Devastator, top deck Planetary Bombardment, ended up dealing 16 damage to my face. So, it does happen. It can happen. It can pull you back from a losing game. That is something that, can pull victory out of the jaws of defeat for you. But we're not going to rely on that. Now, the other thing about Devastator is it does require an answer. So you can play Devastator down, and then your opponent has to answer it, leaving your other tiny when defeated guys alive to still swing in and deal a bunch of damage. So that is our closers. The next thing I want to talk about is our interaction. So every good deck needs some form of interaction for it to be really, really good. And you have to consider it being a strong deck, right? You can't just let your opponents run rampant on you without any kind of answers. So the first interaction is Entrenched, and I run 2 copies of Entrenched. It's a 2 cost, 3/3, +3/+3 upgrade. Attached unit can attack bases. So why this is good in Thrawn? Normally, the downside of Entrenched is the fact that, if you entrench something in space, you're locked out of space for the rest of the game. So a lot of times people play this card in, I'm only going ground or I'm only going space. You just lock out the other lane. You don't care about the other lane. So if they play, their leader on the ground, cool. Entrenched, never going to worry about it again. In Thrawn, it might initially seem a little awkward here because we're playing both lanes. The thing about Entrenched that's kind of good is we want our units to be defeated anyway. So a lot of times, if you entrench like a leader, and then you play Series Officer, they're going to swing into the because they're not going to let it keep attacking base, but then you get a trigger the when defeated. So it does eliminate a threat while also kind of giving your opponent like all right, well, I'm still going to attack you. We don't care about the downside a lot of times. It's also a good way to gum up leaders. So one of the biggest downsides of this deck in particular is leaders can sometimes get out of hand, especially like space pilot leaders. Like if you're playing like against the Kazuda Blue or Kazuda Red. If you just entrench the Kazuda, then they don't have a leader for the rest of the game unless they can get rid of entrenched. If they have like Millennium Falcon, they play Kazuda on it as a pilot, and then you entrench it, and then they play like Cartel Sterncoat because they wanted to like negate all the downsides. Well, now they can't. And now we just run rampant because we get to collect their bounties. All their units have the negative effects, and they don't have a leader anymore. So the deck just doesn't work. Now, it is susceptible to upgrade hate. It is susceptible to like bouncing and things like that. But Entrenched, really solid card. If they don't have upgrade hate, it almost can win you games of itself. If they do have upgrade hate, maybe they didn't want to play it, and then you like mess up a turn. So Entrenched, really powerful. I run 2 of as like anti-leader, anti-threat cards. The next is Disabling Fangs. This is a really simple card. 3 cost, 3/2, defeat and upgrade when played. It doesn't fit the strategy, but it's mainly to clear out pesky lightsabers or pilot leaders. And, I mean, if your opponent's running a pilot leader, well, you know, this is probably one of the best cards you can play because you get to develop your board while defeating their leader flip. We do run 2. I run a 3rd in the sideboard, which we'll get to just for anti-upgrades because you kind of, in this meta, you need a little bit of anti-upgrades. Next, Power of the Dark Side. Power of the Dark Side. I mean, not much to be said. I think this is one of the most powerful cards in the game. 3 cost, an opponent chooses a unit they control, defeat that unit. Pretty simple effect. It's just, this is a great way to defeat leaders, or a turn 1 play, or a turn 2 play in this deck. Often we find we can control the board quite well early on with things like Desperate Commando, or Droid Missile Platform, or Count Dooku. You get to destroy the board a little bit early. Then if they try and like play a big unit to try and just say like, here's a threat, deal with it. Power of the Dark Side. If they try and flip into an open board with their leader, Power of the Dark Side. So Power, really, really powerful card. I run 2 just because, you know, 3, it feels a little bit bad, especially if we don't like to trade, at least I don't like to trade when I play this deck, and like maintain the board that well. So sometimes the board can get away from you a little bit, and then Power of the Dark Side feels awful. But what never, ever, ever feels awful in this deck is No Glory Only Results. Never. It's a great card. So No Glory Only Results, 5 cost, take control of a non-leader unit, then defeat it. So why is this card so good? And it's really the take control of a non-leader unit part. The take control. What you can do is if your opponent wants to play something like a K2SO, you take control of it, then defeat it. Well, now it's under our control. So Thrawn can trigger all friendly when defeated effects. So we can actually take control of the K2SO, defeat it, discard 2 cards from your opponent, or deal 6 damage to them. And it also, you know, has the same effect of if they play Chewbacca Pilot, you can steal it and defeat it. If they play Lurking TIE Phantom, you can defeat it. So it does have that niche play line, but really what you're trying to do is steal when defeated cards with this and trigger it. In the PQ, we will talk about it a little bit later on. My opponent was a Thrawn Yellow, one of them, and he played Legacy Run. That same turn, I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to play No Glory Only Results. I stole their Legacy Run. I double triggered it. I cleared their entire board with it. And he basically paid 5 resources to give me a board clear and kill his leader. I flipped my Thrawn, went to base. It was over right there. So No Glories, really, really powerful. I run a 3rd in the sideboard. I think you could actually make the argument to run a 3rd main deck. So now that you can see that is basically all the cards that I have face up on the board. This is my sideboard. This is what I like to call my spice pile. I left it face down because I didn't want to spoil anything. But there are a few cards that I'm running in this deck, and these were the cards that I believe, like collectively, the cult decided we need to put these together because these unlock the deck right now. What we do, the first card is HK87 Assassin Droid. And you might be saying, first of all, what the hell does this card even do? So it's a 5-cost, 4/4, when defeated, deal 2 damage to each ground unit. And every time I played this during the PQ, I would play it, I'd put it at the very front of my mat and be like, all right, you're going to have to read it. So here you go. And when you're at a high-level tournament and your opponents are reading your cards, it always feels great. I don't know why. So why is this card spicy? It seems pretty bad, right? You might be looking at it and be like, this is draft chaff. You might not even remember this card existed. Well, it's a 5-cost 4/4, so like stats not great. But let's read the when defeated ability really, really closely. Its when defeated ability can deal 4 damage to every unit, which, and it does it in a batch of 2, so it can get rid of shields. HK87 Assassin Droid can get around like a Secretive Sage because it does it in batches of 2. Dealing 4 damage when defeated is pretty significant because there's a lot of times in this game, like think about all of the times that 4 health or 2 health with a shield matters. Secretive Sage, Director Krennic, a cheated out Itinerant Warrior. A lot of times Hans will play a 4/2 shielded Itinerant Warrior. Ki-Adi-Mundi, 4 health. Even sometimes it hardly happens the way that it plays out, but like a Grogu with 2 damage on it can be HK87. We're going to talk about HK87. There's one more secret play line with HK87 Assassin Droid that I'm going to get into in a future section. Just note, this card, insanely good in Thrawn. It won me 3 games into the Anakin Blues that I played. And we'll get to why here soon. Next is K2SO. K2SO is a card that I think when Thrawn first was released, everybody was like, yeah, obviously K2SO is going to be good in Thrawn, but is he good enough to run at 6? And I tried to make the argument, and I think I successfully did make the argument, that let's compare K2SO to one other card. Let's compare K2SO to Ruthless Raider. In Thrawn, both are 6-cost. Forgive me, I'll read K2SO here. K2SO is a 4-cost, Overwhelm 4/4 when defeated. For each opponent, choose one. Either deal 3 damage to that player's base, or that player discards a card from their hand. If you compare this to Ruthless Raider, both cost 6, both have 4 attack. Both technically threaten 6 damage once they've been defeated. With Ruthless Raider, it has 2 fast damage, but when defeated, it has 2 batches of deal 2 damage, so that's 6 base damage. K2SO doesn't have the fast damage, but it does have the when defeated deal like 2 batches of 3 damage. So both of them, if defeated, 6 damage. K2SO has the alternate mode of discarding 2 cards. So sometimes if you don't have them that burned out, or if you have like lethal on board, they have 2 cards in hand. If you can defeat your own K2SO and discard their hand, sometimes you win just right off that. But if you compare them, K2SO, my argument is a Ruthless Raider on the ground. And I think that's good enough. Would you want to run 6 Ruthless Raiders if you could? In this deck, I think I would. Ruthless Raider might be one of the most impactful cards, and having a 3rd, or having a 4th, 5th, and 6th on the ground has to be good. It also lets you pivot to ground if for some reason they have space locked up. And the other big thing, since, I am getting a notoriety of the math guy here, let's go to turn 5, right? The 6 resource turn. If you're running 3 copies of Ruthless Raider, which is like probably the card that we want to play if you weren't running K2SO, you have a 63% chance of seeing at least one every game. All right, that doesn't seem bad, right? Over 55, or, over 50% of the games, 2/3 of the games you see a Ruthless Raider. If you run 3 K2SOs, which I do, you go from 63% to 88%. That's an increase of 25% more. Like a quarter of your games more, you're going to see the equivalent of a Ruthless Raider by the time you can play them. That's insane. Getting that level of consistency for one of your best closers is really good. Like a lot of times you're going to play Ruthless Raider and your opponent's going to be like, crap, now I got to deal with a Ruthless Raider. And you're like, okay, now deal with a K2SO. The only problem is K2SO is unique, so you can't go K2, K2 like you can Ruthless Raider, but sometimes that actually is a benefit, right? Because if you go K2SO, you swing with your K2SO, and then you go, all right, I'm going to play a second K2SO as a follow-up, defeat the first K2SO, deal 6 damage to base. That's 10 damage. So it being unique is actually sometimes a positive, sometimes a negative, but you can use it to your advantage if you play around it smart. So I think 3K2SO, really strong in the deck. You're going to play it out and people are going to be like, crap, that is such a good card. It does so much damage. And then the last spicy card we have is I run 3 Heroic Sacrifice. Now this was the card, in my opinion, that unlocked the deck. So for those who don't know, Heroic Sacrifice is originally a 1-cost red hero card. Draw a card, then attack with a unit. For this attack, it gets +2/+0 and gains when this unit deals combat damage, defeat it. So in this deck, it costs 3. And you might be asking, is 3 worth it? And let me tell you, I'll just answer it right out. It is. So let me put it this way. You have an series officer, and I'm just gonna stack it up. Series officer. At worst, this threatens 4 damage to base. If you play a ground unit and I just run it into the ground unit, it deals 4 damage. Okay, not that crazy, right? Well, with Heroic Sacrifice, the same series officer, it threatens 8 damage because it gets the +2 from the Heroic Sac. And then when it defeats itself, it gets the double trigger for 4. So series officer with Heroic Sacrifice. So for 5 resources is 8 damage to base with a 2-card combo. That's really nasty. So let's get even nastier. Let's look at it with Ruthless Raider. Now, Ruthless Raider. You play your Ruthless Raider on turn 5. 6 resources, you deal 2 damage to base. Next turn, if they don't defeat it, and you Heroic Sacrifice it, that is 10 damage to base. And a total of 12 damage with the when played. So you play Ruthless Raider, you do your 2 damage. When you Heroic Sack it, you do 4 damage +2, so that's 6 attack damage. When defeated, double trigger the when defeated ability, 2 damage to base, another 2 damage to base, and 4 damage to a unit. So even if you don't ice the game, you can honestly probably defeat something kind of relevant and important. I mean, a Heroic Sacked Ruthless Raider threatens 10 damage. And if it Ruthless Raider just sitting on the board, at worst threatens 4 damage. So we more than double the threatening damage with a Heroic Sacrifice with Ruthless Raider. And looking at it one more time with K2SO, you play K2SO 4/4. Next turn, K2SO at worst threatens 6 damage because if he can suicide himself, you double trigger, that's 6 damage to base. Heroic Sack, it allows K2SO to threaten 12 damage. So this card on the board can threaten 12 damage. Why I want to kind of highlight this is it really puts the 2 modes of the card, it kind of combines them, right? And so the 2 modes are basically either attack or die. And they get rolled into 1. You get to double or over double the damage output with Heroic Sack of a lot of these cards because you get to combine that on attack and the when defeated stuff. I want to kind of put a scenario out there for you, and it's not like that crazy. And we need to look at, again, some of the math of how this game works. If your opponent is running a 28 HP force base, most of the time the trick is to get them down to where you can kill them with 1 action, right? That's the whole point of the game. Usually, you have to get them down to like 4 to 6 health, because a lot of times you go, okay, I'm going to swing with a Count Dooku, deal 6 damage to your base, GG. We need to extend that reach. Most times, if all you have is like 4 damage from a droid missile platform, well, you have to deal 24 damage throughout the game to put them in that check position. And that doesn't actually seem that good. We do have a lot of burn damage in the deck, but with Heroic Sacrifice, what happens is you can drop that needing to deal 24 damage to base to something like dealing 16 damage to base. 16 damage to base is all you need to put somebody in a check scenario with like a K2SO Heroic Sacrifice. 18 damage for Ruthless Raider, 20 damage to base for a freaking 2-cost card. Series Officer, Heroic Sacrifice, threatens 8 damage to base. If they are running a force base, you just need to deal 20 damage to them throughout the game, which is actually not that hard to do in this deck for basically 5 resources worth of cards to defeat them. And it makes something like leaving an series officer on the board a mistake. which is wild to think that a 2-cost 2/1 being left on the board is game losing when you're 8 health away. Heroic Sack, I run 3. There was a time where I was considering dropping this number, but the fact that it also kind of goes into, like, so if we, putting these spice cards into their respective piles here, K2SOs, HK87s go to the When Defeated pile. Heroic Sack goes into the When Defeated Enabler pile. It is just 3 cost, trigger one of your death rattles, is so strong for the deck. Our other When Defeateds are like Count Dooku, which is kind of finicky, can be finicky, and Chimera is just really expensive. Heroic Sacrifice, 3 cost, activate When Defeated, deal a ton of damage. It unlocked this deck once we put this in here. So Heroic Sack, K2SO, HK87 are the spice cards. So let's quickly talk about the sideboard cards. This sideboard does need work, but it is the exact sideboard that I took to the PQ. And to start off, we brought 2 restocks. Reason why, it shuts off Anakin's, it shuts off green hero decks with their like stupid home ones. It also obviously shuts down Kylo Ren. I didn't see a single Kylo Ren, I did see one Anakin, but restock didn't come in that game. So restocks probably getting taken out. It was just never impactful. Next card, I run 3 Onyx Squadron Brutes. These really, really good into heavy space aggro decks like Darth Vader, because you also get to not only probably take out 2 of their units with it, but heal 4. So this can sometimes be like a 7 HP difference if it starts like actually being just okay. And often this gives us just 1 more turn, which in all of the games I lost, except for like 1 or 2, I was 1 action away from winning. So Onyx Squadron Brutes, really strong. And actually, as we'll see, the way that I would change this deck, I think I'm actually running all 3 of these main board. Just the extra HP can really, really steal games from a lot of players. Like that 4 HP is just so strong. And then we run 1 Disabling Fang Fighter, pilot decks, upgrade decks. Again, not much to talk about here. Just 1 extra. Bombing runs, space aggro decks. I didn't run into a single Vader. Probably take these out going forward. We have 1 more HK87. I run 2 main deck, 1 sideboard. And then we also run 1 more no glory only results. HK47, really good into mid-range ground force decks. Like this card shuts off force decks. And no glory only results, kind of good if you like need extra removal and the When Defeated. So like if you're going into for some reason a Thrawn mirror, this comes in, maybe it should be main decked anyway. If you're going up against like red hero decks, sometimes this should go in anyway, just because you can steal their K2SO, and then we get like a 5-cost cheap K2SO. Other times where this is good is actually into green villainy decks, because you can steal their Super Laser Technician. Now, you don't get a double trigger it, but you do get to steal the ramp, which is really impactful. Besides the obvious, like, turn 1 Krennic into turn 2 Stormtrooper, or into, turn 1 Krennic, turn 2 double 2-drop, or even if you're getting real crazy, turn 1 Krennic into 3-drop, First Order Stormtrooper. All of those pretty self-explanatory play lines, and you'll figure that out as soon as you play the deck, right? A couple times you're like, oh wow, yeah, Krennic's really powerful, all that. We've already talked about a lot of the major combos in the deck, but there's one hidden combo that I didn't quite, break down as much as I should. And that is a turn 4 HK87 Assassin Droid. Now, why I really want to highlight this is one of the hidden combos that if you were to take this deck and try it out on Petronaki, a lot of times I feel like players would resource this card because they think it's dog water, and then after 2 or 3 games, they pull it out of the deck. I want to unlock this for you. Let's break it down. Let's reread Chimera. When played, you may use the When Defeated ability on another friendly unit. So, if you play Chimera and you target HK87 Assassin Droid, what would happen is HK87's Assassin Droid's text reads, when defeated, deal 2 damage to each ground unit. Each ground unit, including himself. So why that matters, right? Typically that wouldn't matter because when defeated abilities only trigger if that unit's defeated. So it doesn't matter that it like doesn't say other because it should be understood, right? But with Chimera, that text does matter. What you do is you deal 2 damage to everything, including himself. Then you double trigger, 2 damage again to everything, another 2 damage to itself. Well, HK-87 Assassin Droid defeats himself, and then it would deal another 2 damage to everything. So a Chimera HK-87 Assassin Droid is a 6 damage to ground. And it does it in batches of 2, 3 batches of 2. And why that matters is specifically this. This is not an uncommon Han 2 turn. If they have a Gungi with 6 health, a Churret with 5 health, an Itinerant Warrior with 4 health and a shield, and for the heck of it, let's just say a Ki-Adi-Mundi with 4 health and a Han flipped. That's how they win the game. And typically against Han 2 blues, before that, yeah, they can pressure a lot of damage, but they're not going to kill you before that happens. So a lot of times, you can play HK-87 Assassin Droid. They're not really going to defeat it most times, because if they do try to defeat it, you still double trigger it. And if they were to swing like a 4 attack Ki-Adi-Mundi into it, even an Itinerant Warrior into it, well, you would still defeat the Itinerant Warrior, you would still defeat the Ki-Adi-Mundis, you'd still defeat the, you wouldn't defeat the Churret. That's the only thing that you wouldn't defeat with in that argument there. With a, so a lot of times they won't actually defeat the HK. Then if you follow it up with a Chimera, it would defeat everything I just mentioned. So everything that's on screen right now would be gone with a Chimera HK-87. Because you deal 2 damage to everything, you knock all the shields off, you deal 2 damage to everything else. So at most, you have like a Han and the Gungi with 4 health remaining. You have the Itinerant Warrior with 4 health remaining. The Churret has 3 health remaining. And the Ki-Adi-Mundi has 2. Then, triggers again. Ki-Adi-Mundi's gone. Itinerant Warrior has 2 health. Han has 2 health. Churret has 1 health. Since he would defeat himself, now it's another 2 damage. So, Gungi took 6 damage, gone. Itinerant Warrior took 4 damage after the shield, gone. Han took 6 damage, gone. So, it completely wipes boards. Completely wipes boards. And that's not even to mention if for some reason you had like a Desperate Commando out. Because then if you have Desperate Commando out, once Desperate Commando is defeated, you can -1/-1 like a Quinlan. And Quinlan now has 6 health, and he would also get defeated by it. So HK-87 Chimera is like one of the craziest play line. Now, it is combo-y, but it is a board wipe, and it's really strong. So if you're playing against a lot of force ground decks, HK-87 is almost a never resource in that scenario. And I just really wanted to highlight that because it's really, really, really important to the deck. And I don't want you taking it out. I really want you to try it. The next thing I want to do here, and this will be sped up, is I'm going to shuffle this on screen, and I'm going to do what's called goldfishing. So if you don't know what goldfishing is, if you're newer to TCGs, it's essentially I'm going to play out the deck. I'm going to probably play out like the first 2 or 3 turns just to show you like how the deck plays, right? I can talk about it all I want. I don't really have time or like games recorded for this. So let's just play the game out. I'm going to probably do like a pile shuffle, but I'm going to try and keep all the shuffling on screen so you know that this is all in one take. I'm not cutting, and it's going to sound awful because I do even cut when I do my live reaction stuff. But I'm not even going to cut any of this out because, listen, if this deck draws bad, which would actually be kind of funny right now, then it draws bad. But I'm going to try and goldfish it to show you like what I would do, what I would keep, what I would throw away. So I think I'm going to give this a good, quick pile shuffle here. And I'm going to speed this up. All right, now I'm back. So I'm going to give it a couple more quick shuffles. Now, mind you, if this draw does turn out to be bad, let's just blame the fact that I had everything in piles and it wasn't like truly randomized. But I promise this deck is good, even if this turns out to be bad. So I'm going to throw Thrawn in my base up here, and we're going to go ahead. Deck's going to go right there. It's going to stay in frame. You can see it the whole time. And we're going to go ahead and we are going to draw our first 6 cards. That's 4, 5, 6. So let's see what we got. Well, we start off with an series officer, disabling Fang fighter, desperate commando, Krennic, droid missile platform, Night Sister warrior. So I do suspect that we have a bunch of turn 1 plays, specifically because I kind of had them segregated. But we're going to go ahead and we're just going to treat it like it is. So I think in this case, unless I'm playing against like a Boba Fett deck, I'm probably resourcing droid missile platform here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep... I'm actually probably going to resource... I think I'm going to actually resource droid missile platform. Reason being is I'm going to most likely turn 1 desperate commando and keep my Krennic hidden. And then on the next turn, I can go Krennic into card draw or Krennic into series officer if I want damage. So this is our hand. And hope this like makes sense here. So a lot of times, so we're going to do desperate commando out first. This is really good because against Migs Mayfield, we trade. Against 2/4s, we trade. So we're really, really solid there. So that's our first turn play. We're going to draw 2 more. Night Sister Warrior, HK-87 Assassin Droid. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to resource the second Night Sister Warrior. So this is ready. Now, I think it's prudent to say most likely Desperate Commando does not live here. So we're going to take out our Desperate Commando. It's defeated. Fine. We're going to go ahead and play Krennic. And I think because I want card draw and not to get force thrown, I'm going to go ahead and throw out Night Sister Warrior. Now, most likely, we don't have initiative right now, and we're protected from Power of the Dark Side, so they're going to have to do something crazy like attack with Director Krennic, force throw him, or take him down. So most likely, we can assume that we have the when defeated trigger of Krennic in our back pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 more. We have Power of the Dark Side, and we have K2SO. So this is absolutely crazy. If we're going up against a ground force deck, I think I'm actually keeping HK-87 here. If we're going up against maybe even a mid-range deck, Power of the Dark Side would be really good here. Series Officer threatens a ton of damage. I think in this instance, I'm going to probably try and get rid of power. So, we got Krennic, we have Night Sister Warrior. I think it's safe to say Krennic will probably still be shielded, and he'll most likely survive. I don't think that's crazy to say in this scenario, the way that we played it out. So, let's just say that Krennic gets his shield popped. I think the first thing you do is for all 4 resources, we're just going to play our HK-87 Assassin. Now, we have a 4/4 board clear, and it could backfire on us because if they go ahead and take us out, well, we get to draw 2 cards anyway. Krennic's probably defeated, but I think we want to go this route just because now we have a board clear against us, like a ground deck. Even if it's Sabine on the next turn, we might not be able to defeat him the way that we have it right now, but it does threaten it can defeat a lot of their stuff. And eventually it might be able to clear her entire board. I think we go ahead and we do that. I would say most times people go ahead and defeat Krennic here. And I'm going to say that we trade our Night Sister Warrior into something. And we draw 2. I think that's the way that you can argue that that would have gone. I don't think that's like way out of line. All right. So we drew 2. Let's just say that we passed and we didn't get initiative. Let's draw 2 more. And in this instance, we do have something kind of awkward. But maybe not really. We're going to have 5 resources going into the next turn. We do have a board clear, kind of. This can actually deal 8 damage to a single unit, and then 4 to the rest, which actually is like kind of pretty good. So I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to resource Devastator. Reason being, we already have in our hand, let's just go ahead and point this out. We have 6 damage from Ruthless Raider. We have 6 damage from K2SO. And we have 4 damage from Series Officer. And also, we have another like 2 damage from Heroic Sack. So let's just say, for sake of argument, we get a Heroic Sack, at worst the Series Officer. So that's 8 damage right there. And let's just say we haven't hit any damage to base. 8 damage. And then we have 6 damage, 12 damage. So 6, 12 plus 8 is 20 damage. So on those 4 cards, we have 20 damage to their base. I think I'm okay resourcing Devastator here because we have so much threatening damage, and we still have our leader flip, which usually is a 4 damage, like almost guaranteed 4 damage. So we have our HK Assassin Droid. Most times, this is the moment where their leader flips. So I think what I'm going to do is actually be greedy, because I feel like in this scenario, we've probably only taken maybe 4 damage, maybe 2 damage, maybe no damage to base. We're going to do 4 damage to their base, so we're going to count 4. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to play Droid Missile Platform into space. Reason being is we don't want to give them any juicy Series Officer stuff just yet. And then let's say they go to base and they leave this HK Assassin Droid alive. Or even let's just say that they got good. They defeated HK Assassin Droid with only like defeating 1 or 2 of their units. So this goes away, but it did deal 4 damage to base. We're going to go ahead, use our other 2 resources to play the And, I mean, right now we still have Thrawn up. So most likely they're not defeating either of these, because defeating either of these is either 6 indirect damage or 4 damage to base. So let's just go to the next turn. I think this is a fair point to put us in. So now we have Dooku and we have no glory, only results. And I literally, at this point, am resourcing one of these 2 cards, probably. Either Ruthless Raider or K2SO. No glory is really good, just in case they try and, like, Hail Mary us and, like, they throw down a big card. So I think right now you go... I think I'm going to resource... I think I'm going to resource the K2SO. Reason being K2SO over Ruthless Raider is we have Count Dooku, which is a big threat on the ground. That way we can spread the threats to space. Now this is our leader flip turn, and this is a big deal. So we have 6 resources. And that's important because we can either, and this doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but if we had like a different hand, it would. But if we use 4 resources, we could exploit both of these. We could deal 4 damage to something, 2 damage to something else. And depending on the board state, you would either double trigger the 3 indirect damage to deal 6 damage to face, or you double trigger Series Officer to deal 4 damage to base. I think regardless, since we have 6 resources and we don't think they can defeat both of our units, I think what we're going to do is I'm actually going to send 4 damage to base, because I want them to defeat Series Officer. I don't want them to touch my Droid Missile Platform because we like to defeat that on our own terms. So then, let's just say for sake of argument, they're going to go ahead and they're going to defeat Series Officer, because I think that's actually the worst thing that could happen for us. We double trigger 4 damage to base. So we've dealt in total 12 damage to base. We have a 4-2. We have our leader flip. I would probably, at this point, depending on the board state, it's either Ruthless Raider or it's Count Dooku exploit Droid Missile Platform. Exploiting Droid Missile Platform right now only deals 3 indirect damage because we exhausted our leader. If you feel safe enough to flip Thrawn, that might change things. So I think what I'm doing right now is I'm actually probably flipping Thrawn, because it's kind of like a wasted action, because I want to react to what they're doing. We have a lot of things we could do. we can either Count Dooku, Ruthless Raider, and, I mean, hell, we could even No Glory if it makes sense. Or, if we had them chipped away enough, we could actually Heroic Sack our own Thrawn to draw a card. But what I want to do now is, if Thrawn feels like he's going to live, then we deal 4 to base with Thrawn, and then probably play out Ruthless Raider, dealing 2 and 2. Reason why I played Thrawn out is, since we exhausted Thrawn over here, now that Thrawn is deployed, we have the undefeated trigger again. So if we play our Ruthless Raider, or if we go ahead and we exploit our droid missile platform, we get to double trigger it this way, where we wouldn't before. So I think flipping Thrawn is right. If they waste removal defeating Thrawn, well, then, I mean, that's fine, because then you Count Dooku or you Ruthless Raider. So I think playing Thrawn is the way to go, because Thrawn actually is not that threatening himself. Thrawn is just enabling our other stuff. And if they waste their entire turn defeating Thrawn, then it also saves the Ruthless Raider when defeated trigger, because they most likely won't be able to defeat both Thrawn and Ruthless Raider on the same turn. So I'm going to flip Thrawn. Let's say Thrawn lives, like I said, so we've done 12 damage to base. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to play Ruthless Raider, and we've done 14 damage to base. And so 14 damage to base, we have 4, 8, 12 damage threatening on board, and in our pocket, we have Heroic Sack, Ruthless Raider, which is 10 damage. So, what did I say? 14 damage to base, plus 10, that's 24 damage with 3 resources next round. We could also, next turn, we'll be at 7 resources, so technically we could swing with one of our units. Then, like, we could swing with Ruthless Raider, exploit Count Dooku, and maybe even Thrawn to clear their board, and then follow that up with whatever droid missile platform or whatever we can Heroic Sack to win the game. So we're going to go ahead and draw 2, and this will be the last turn. All right. At this point, we need to resource 1 card, and I think the card I'm probably resourcing is Disabling Fang Fighter. I don't think that's going to do anything here. And depending on the board state, this might just be game over. Like I said, 14 damage to base. Means that most likely, let's just say we're even playing against a Data Vault player. So what, they have 17 health left. So we need to deal 17 damage this turn. Turn 7, we need to deal 17 damage. Do we have a way to deal 17 damage? Let's not even say that we have initiative. I would say most likely Heroic Sacrifice or Ruthless Raider would probably, let's just say that it gets defeated. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double trigger the when defeated. So 4 damage to base. Now we're at 13 damage to base. I think what I would do in this case is another 4 with Thrawn. And no, we're not going to do that. I think in this case, I'm actually going to say I'm going to pay 3 and I'm going to just Heroic Sack Droid Missile Platform into base. So that's 6 damage plus 4. So we need to deal 7 more damage, because let's just say the 3 indirect damage doesn't hit where we want it to go. But we also get to draw a card. So we've done, what did I say, 6 plus 6, 12. So we need to deal 5 more damage. Most likely, Thrawn may have died here. Let's just call it. And in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I would actually probably claim. And we would draw 2 here. Reason for claiming is because I didn't want to put Series Officer, because I'm saying that we need to deal like 5 more damage right now. If you play then they defeat it that same turn. You only deal 2, and you'll need to deal 3 more damage. So I think what we're going to do is we'll probably go ahead and go like that. So now we're at 8 resources. So you can do We have the double trigger live. And if they don't, I'd say you go Chimera with the follow-up. You trigger this, 4 damage to base. You're 1 damage off killing a Boba Data Vault right now. If they haven't killed you, then, you know, you probably win, because on the next turn, even if they clear your board with like an OB, you just play Ruthless Raider and win. So probably went a little deep. You get a little bit with the hypotheticals, but I wanted to just, ramble and show you kind of how the deck plays out, kind of how the deck works, kind of how it looks, kind of how it feels, decisions I would make. But yeah, let me know what you think. And we're going to go into the run that I did on the PQ and talk about how this deck actually gets better this set. How did I do at the PQ? Round 1 was a Boba Data Vault where I won game 1. Game 2, I lost by a single HP. And they started off with Allegiant General Pride, and I couldn't kill him until like turn 3. They had initiative, so it did something like 8 damage to me. Game 3, I also lost 1 action away because my opponent went Devastator into Planetary Bombardment, which was 16 damage to base over 2 actions, and it hit me with like exact C's damage. Round 2, I played against the Thrawn Yellow and absolutely destroyed them. They played a Legacy run, and I no-gloried it to clear their board, and their leader dealing 12 damage to their units. It was an absolute blowout, and it was disgusting. Round 3, I played against an Anakin Blue Force Base and won 2-0 off the back of an HK-87 into Chimera, so we got the triple trigger, cleared out, I think, 2 Itinerant Warriors and a Yaddle or something like that. And the player after the game was just staring off into the abyss like, I can't believe that just happened to me. Round 4, I played into a Poe ECL, and this is where it got kind of bad. I mean, it's hard for this deck to win, and both games, it was like great space starts into ECL Poe or K2. And I still want to say, like, I was a single action away in both of these games from winning. I just didn't have the proper cards in hand, so the bad matchup, but not like completely unwinnable games. Round 5, I played into another Anakin Blue Force Base, and we split the first 2 games. They won game 1 because they had initiative and also a Sabine. My only turn 1 play at that point was Krennic, so maybe I shouldn't have even played him, but like Sabine efficiently traded into Krennic, and it was almost over from there. I just kind of didn't expect a Sabine in a Force version of Anakin to be run, but maybe I should have. Game 2, I ended up winning because another HK-87 came in and like did really good, cleared their board, absolutely turned the tide into my favor. Game 3, I had an okay hand, but not like a great hand, so I decided to mulligan it, and I had no turn 1 play. Into, like, it was unplayable, the hand could not win. If you don't have a turn 1 play, especially against an Anakin who then ran a Sabine again on turn 1, it was just GG's because I mulliganed into a bad hand. But I run like 15 turn 1 plays, so that happening to me was so low odds, but it did. It happened, and that's the variance of the card games. That's why we play the games. Round 6 was Sabine ECL. Same thing as the Poe ECL games. They started out like A-Wing into Luke Pilot, into Sabine Flip, into like an ECL Poe and Wrecker to finish off the games. I mean, if that happens to you, there's not much like any deck can do in that situation. It was pretty bad. Lastly, I played into like a Shadows Kylo Tarkin Town. Round 1 was bad. They had MiGs. They T-Town my turn 1 play. And the turn after their Kylo flipped, they played Chaos of War and had something crazy like 40 damage represented on board. So I scooped round 1. Round 2, we brought in the Onyx Squadron Brutes and had initiative. So we entrenched Kylo, which actually was a bad play because they just played aggression to defeat it. And it was almost like a wasted 2 resources. But the Onyx Squadron Brute and Count Dooku board clear won me that game. And in round 3, much of the same. Onyx heals into a Count Dooku board clear. Thrawn helped manage the board when he flipped and let me win with 28 damage on my base. My final record ended up being 3-4. I made the Texas Roadhouse cut. Again, it was a fun deck. I felt like it could have gone 5-2. Probably can't count the wins into Red Hero ECL. But I think turn 1 play game 3 against Anakin, I have a good chance. And if Boba Data Vault doesn't, have 2 absolute nuts games, I think you win that matchup. I actually think you're favored into Boba Data Vault. I think this deck could have gone 5-2 at this PQ. Obviously, it went 3-4, but I think it's good. I think there's something here. There is one more interesting thing that's going to happen to Thrawn Red before the end of this set. There's a new product called Intro Battle Hoth that will be Premier Legal, set to be released, I believe, October 3rd. I've seen some people say August 29th, but from what I've seen, it's always been October 3rd. Intro Battle Hoth is a set designed completely for new players, and all the cards were intentionally designed to be kind of bad. However, there are actually a couple few cool gems in the set that might actually see premiere play. The one that we're going to talk about today is Admiral Ozzel, who's a 3-cost 3/1 when defeated, each opponent discards a card from their hand. This is the card that we wanted Jedi in Hiding to be, and this is the card that's going to turn the power level of Thrawn Red up to 11. Admiral Ozzel is effectively a 3-cost pillage with a 3/1 body. Pillage is already a great card that actually sees competitive play. Now imagine you get to play Ozzel turn 2, so turn 3, you get to effectively pillage your opponent while also usually defeating their turn 1 play. And you still have your 4 resources left over that turn. You could even hit them with a pillage as a follow-up, and take all the cards for them by turn 3. Or play a 4-drop and just claim, so now they're kind of in top deck mode and you've developed your board. Hell, we're even debating running Force Throw, because think of it like this. If your opponent never draws extra cards, they usually have either 3 or 4 cards in their hand, since we draw 6 in Resource 2 at the start of the game. If they play a card, they go from 4 cards to 3 cards. If you Ozzel them as your first action on turn 3 and discard 2, they now have 2 cards in their hand, and when they play the card, they go down to a single card in their hand. With 4 open resources, you could just Force Throw them, take that last card, and then play a 3-drop behind it like Droid Missile Platform, and that's kind of disgusting. So with Ozzel's release, this would be how the deck changes. I'm putting the Onyx Squadron Brutes main deck for space and aggro matchups. I'm moving the Planetary Bombardments and disabling Fang Fighters to the sideboard, cutting the restocks, and also adding Perimeter AT-RTs to the sideboard as a sentinel to help me survive against aggressive decks. We run 3 Ozzel and 2 to 3 Pillage to steal all the cards out of our opponent's hands. I'm also adding in Daring Raids over the Stormtroopers, since Daring Raid almost does exactly what Stormtroopers want to do, but we get to control where it goes, and it's kind of quick damage. There's also a possibility that we decide to replace the Daring Raid with Force Throw like I just discussed, easily taking all our opponent's cards from them by turn 3, and we do run 5 Force units, so there's a chance that we even get the bonus damage from Force Throw, but that's not necessary. And that's the Thrawn guide. I hope you all enjoyed the deck tech, and let me know what you thought of the new format. This was a deck driven by my community, and I just helped put it out there, and I did play it at a PQ. If you want a deck build with the community or just talk and hang out, if you liked the video, consider giving it a like, and consider subscribing for more content like this in the future. I want to continue doing more off-meta deck techs like this, so let me know in the comments which leader you want to see next. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and see ya.